My name is Amanda.
And I'm Kristin.
And we are the Exorcisters. So sit back, relax, and let's get freaky.
Yes.
Welcome to episode 24. And in this episode, we will be discussing the 1932 black and white talkie film,
Yes.
Freaks. And something cool about this, even if you've never seen this before, I know that most of you as horror fans have probably appreciated it if you have seen American Horror Story Season 4, Freak Show, because that is a callback to this movie.
Absolutely.
And
or you've at least heard the phrase.
Yes.
Because even in sitcoms, they talk about it.
Exactly. And then the one of us.
That's exactly. Is in everything.
I had no idea where that was from. Mm-hmm. It just is one of those pop culture things that everybody knows. And it's like one of those things, are you just born with that knowledge, you know?
Exactly.
And it's from Freaks.
Well, I'm glad you've seen it now.
Yeah, me too. And it's only about an hour long. So if you can get your hands on it to watch it, I'm not saying it is, because this is not how I watched it, but it may even, because it's so old, be on platforms like YouTube for free.
Yeah,
I'm
maybe.
not sure, but
I know when we were looking at our movies throughout the century, there were some that were on YouTube, so it might be one of them now.
Yeah, especially a lot of those older ones. And this one is, like I said, black and white, but it is a talkie, but the audio is a little messy.
It's old and not very loved. It's not like Dracula or Frankenstein where people have
preserved it very well. So it's a little hard to understand. So I actually took notes, but I ended up stopping my notes because I just needed to pay attention so much because I was missing some dialogue. And it is because so this is a circus of freaks, and I'm only saying this this is what they call them in the movie, not what I'm calling them. There are two midgets.
Yes.
And they both have very high voices, but the man especially was a little hard to understand for me. All of his dialogue was really muddy for me because his voice is so high-pitched, and it is just not stellar audio quality because it was the 1930s. This was, talkies hadn't even been around for that long, because if you look at Nosferatu, which was 1921 or 22, that was a silent film.
Yes.
And this is only 10 years later.
Yes.
So, it's not like they had huge breakthroughs, so just go into it knowing that, but you still understand the story perfectly and you know exactly what's going on. So we'll do the walkthrough and talk about it. But you'd be amazed how similar a lot of the characters are to Freak Show and Freaks, even aesthetically.
Yes.
They just took pretty much directly from this and created a series. Now, there is no demon clown. You don't get Twisty, but you get, you get
Frozo.
Exactly. And you get the childlike mentality ones that,
Yes. The pinheads.
Yes.
Is what they're termed as.
Exactly. So the movie opens with a basically sideshow attraction drawing in people to visit it, and a woman looks into a box to view something and screams, and you don't really know what this is. And
you don't find out till the end.
Yeah, the man explains that the horror in the box was once a beautiful and talented trapeze artist. And real quick, I forgot to mention that even before we go into this, there is something that scrolls on the screen before the movie begins. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of like a disclaimer. And it talks about the history of misshapen misfits. And the love of beauty is a deep-seated urge that dates back to the true beginning of civilization. And discussing freaks, their lot is truly a heartbreaking one. They are forced to live unnatural lives. We present a horror story of the abnormal and the unwanted. And it actually says it's sad in that, basically.
Right. So actually, why is because the creator, the director, the producer, everything on this was Tod Browning, which he actually did Dracula before this. And once he did Dracula, the studio was like, "You're amazing. We love you. You can literally do whatever you want." So he decided to do this. And he did this because he actually grew up in a circus.
Really?
He grew up around people like this. When he brought them to Hollywood to do this movie, he told them, he was like, go full Hollywood. People came on set with their glasses and they're so excited until they were sitting in the commissary. And of course, normal people got upset and they built a tent for them outside in the commissary so they couldn't eat lunch in there.
Which is so sad. This movie actually, there are some what we perceive now as offensive terms and things like that. And we can't even fathom we can. It's just different now because now we do it online.
Yes.
But just gawking and laughing at someone for being born different.
Yes.
So to pretend that we have moved on from that is foolish in my opinion because we haven't. Now we just do it online and ridicule people. But this was one of those you actually paid to gasp at these deformities, and this movie does actually have a really good moral,
yes,
though, so don't worry,
because he loved them.
Exactly, don't worry too much about this just being sad and abusive to these people, because it does come out with a message that he wanted the world to hear about these people, because like you said, he was raised with them, so he loved them and he knew that they were just people. They just looked different,
which is unfortunate because this actually ruined his career.
But at least we have it.
We do have it. And the only reason we do have it is actually because of cult followings of people. They wanted this to die. And people throughout the years, actually in like the 70s and 80s, brought this back.
Good.
As something for us to watch.
Yeah, and that's something we should talk about at the end, because there's a reason people clamored for it to be basically annihilated from pop culture. Mm-hmm. It does start with, you don't know exactly what these people are looking at, but you hear the story about how she was her name is Cleopatra, and she's beautiful. And you see, she is performing. And this little couple, the man is so enthralled by her and is so he can't stop looking at her. And his fiance is upset. She's like, you can't stop looking at her, and he's like, oh, I only have eyes for...
She's not as upset as I would be, though.
No.
Like, she's pretty calm the whole time.
I'm kind of wondering if that's a decade kind of thing, like maybe she needed to be like more reserved,
or also a like cultural thing, because they have, I think they're in France when they're doing this, and they have a lot of French speaking people and German speaking people, so I'm wondering if it's like a European circus.
I would think so, and a lot of women have to basically be silent and not complain. And maybe that was part of it too. I don't know. It's interesting because she's just upset by it, but she just kind of brushes it off and stews about it. Yeah. And she is done performing, and she comes up to Hans and is very flirtatious with him, and you can tell that she's not really interested in him as like a person. She's
just like one of those women, and come on, we all know one of those women.
Yes,
or she's just playing with him.
Well, she just wants the attention. She enjoys the attention. So side note, you guys, we just stopped recording for about 30 minutes and just sitting and waiting because my neighbors are outside talking, and it doesn't look like that's going to end anytime soon, but they seem quiet enough to where we may be able to talk over them. So if you hear background noise, I apologize, but we really need to get this recording going. And unfortunately, we don't have a studio at the moment. Yes. So we're just going to go ahead and get through this. And I'm sorry if you hear background talking, but hopefully you won't. So Cleopatra we were saying she was very flirty, one of those girls like you were saying, and she just has this thing for Hans, and you don't really know why at first. But of course Hans' fiance is
Frida,
super upset, and then you get this other character named Venus. And she is also a performer. She is of normal size. She is not one of the freaks, if you will, but she does love the freaks.
Yes.
She is not one of those, because Cleopatra, and there are a few other normies, if you will, that look down on them. They think that they're nasty, atrocious, second-class citizens. Cleopatra is one of them. But Venus is not. And so Hans' fiance is talking to Venus about these problems, that they're having, and about Cleopatra. So you see this kind of building to a head and being a problem. So Cleopatra finds out that Hans has a sizable fortune.
Right.
He is wealthy and comes from wealth. And so she's driven by money and wealth. Yeah. And so she wants to basically seduce him and be with him, and it happens so fast. Like he's just been so enamored by her.
He was just engaged to some other woman,
and now they're getting married.
Yes,
Cleopatra and Hans are getting married because Hans is like, oh, she's gonna make me happy, and his fiance is like, no, she's not. But he doesn't see anything other than her beauty and grace. And like, again, it's just so enamored with her. And Cleopatra also conspires with the circus Hercules. I think his name in the movie is Hercules.
Yes.
Is what they call him. They decide to conspire to kill Hans to inherit his wealth. So they do have some sort of affair going on here.
Yes.
Between Cleopatra and Hercules. And so they're in it together where she's going to marry him, get the fortune, and then they'll be together and they'll be rich with his money is what happens. And at their wedding reception, so they go through with this whole thing. At their wedding reception, she begins poisoning Hans' wine, but also kisses Hercules in front of him, making him look like a fool. It's so sad. They just like get after it.
Yes. That's when they do the whole gooble gobble,
yes.
gooble gobble. Because they're trying to, if Hans likes her and they like Hans, they're gonna make her part of the team.
Exactly.
And she freaks.
Yeah, she does. So obviously Hans sees that this affair is going on, and totally the freaks don't even, they're just like totally oblivious, I guess you could say. And they announce...
They're partying, they're drinking,
exactly.
They're having a good old time.
They announce that they accept Cleopatra in spite of her being a normal outsider. And, of course, they hold an initiation ceremony in which that's when they pass the cup around.
Which I think is really sweet. Like, they all drink from the same cup. That's their initiation.
Yes.
That's really cool.
Yeah, and that's, like you said, we get the we accept her, one of us, gooba gobble. And so she's a bitch. And at first she's like amused by their freakishness, I guess you could say. And then she just gets pissed after Hercules jokes that the freaks plan to turn her into one of them. She's like, I am not one of them, but she just married one of them.
Right.
And so she mocks them and she throws, it was so sad. So one of them gets up on the table to basically present the cup to her, and she throws wine all over him and his face just sinks. And I was like, oh my God, how sad is this? It was just so sad to see his face, and like they all looked so sad and hurt and betrayed. And of course, because I'm sure it's so, I can't really imagine being deformed, I guess, in their words. And so to find a normal person that wants to...
That you think is accepting
that is going to not only accept that, but marry one of you regardless, and then be slapped in the face and literally have wine thrown all over you because you're a freak. Like, it was just a really sad scene, but they throw it back in her face. But so anyways, then after she throws this wine in her face, she like puts her new husband up on her shoulders.
Yeah, and Hans is so sad. He's like covering his face.
Yeah, and she's like parading him around like a kid.
Yeah.
And I actually texted you and I was like, so I thought the premise of this was like they were all actually in the circus, like in real life, but he does have such a, not at his size, but his face, he is so childlike. Yes. I was like, did they use child actors for this? Which no.
These were all circus performers. And there were many of them that were on like, so a lot of freak show performers got like almost baseball card stuff.
Oh, yeah.
When they were that important. And a lot of these were actually like, had baseball cards.
They were like,
for lack of a better term,
that world.
Yes.
Yeah. And poor Hans is humiliated, and he realizes that he's been played. And he realizes that he should have stayed with his fiance, because his fiance tried to warn him. And he's absolutely beside himself. And Cleopatra tries to apologize, and he's like, no, you are using me, and goes into all this. But then all of a sudden he's really sick because she's been poisoning him.
Yeah.
And then he is so sick that he is bedridden, and Hans is starting to kind of pick up. So you see her making him all these drinks and spoonfuls of things.
She keeps like dabbing stuff in there. It's like, okay.
And Hans pretends to apologize to her and also pretends to take the medicine, but he basically grabs like a spoon and shoves it under the covers so she can't see him not take it. Which is
good. He figures it out fast.
He does, yeah. And there's also someone, they kind of have these trailers that are their homes, and
they're a caravan.
Yeah. Exactly. One of his people is kind of peeking in on the situation to keep tabs on things, because at this point they know, and Hans knows too, but they especially are like, she's bad news for him. We need to protect him. So he's been kind of watching through the window and observing what's been going on. And so he knows. And so he plots with the Hans, now that they all know, because he goes back to reports to the other freaks, they want to get revenge. And they know that Cleopatra and Hercules are in on this because they've been spying on their conversations and also their lovemaking, which is kind of weird, but it cuts away from that. But so Hans confronts Cleopatra with 3 of the freaks, basically as backup, and he says, "Show me that bottle."
All sitting in there,
and so one of them's like, he's like polishing a knife,
and the other's like got a gun, and they're ready.
And she's like, and he's like, "You need to show me the bottle of whatever she's giving him." And she's like, of course, backed into a corner essentially, and actually,
literally,
yeah. And so she's like, no. So then the Hans circus wagon is overturned in this storm, giving her a chance to escape, because this whole scene has played out and she realizes that they are coming for her and they have figured this out.
They're gonna kill her. They're fucking pissed off.
Yeah. Which, fair, she would kill him. She would have killed him. They know that she was trying to kill him, not just make him sick, not just disable him, but to actually murder him. And the circus wagon is overturned in the storm and she bails. But they are right behind her. And at the same time, Hercules, they have this seal. So Venus is a seal trainer. Venus is the one that likes them and is friends with Hans' fiance. And he tries to kill her for knowing about what they're doing. And Venus's boyfriend attempts to stop Hercules, but is
the clown.
Yes, the clown is nearly killed before the freaks intervene and injure Hercules, saving both of them, which is cool. So it's kind of like you know how I feel about it. It's my favorite horror movie like ever. Like the Losers Club.
Yeah,
they band together, and that's those are their people.
Circus folk are known for banding together, and you don't fuck with one of their own. So don't fuck with one of their own.
Yeah, even from the inside.
Literally, they're like crawling under trailers and shit to get to you.
Yeah. And the freaks basically go after Hercules, and you just don't see him again. So, little tidbit here. I'm sorry if you have this written down. The film's original ending had the freaks castrating him.
Yeah, but it was too much. I don't have it written down, but I did read that. Yeah. And they're like crawling to him underneath this caravan. Yes. It is pretty creepy.
It is creepy.
There's this dude who's basically just a torso and a head, and he's got a knife in his teeth, and you're like, what the fuck is he going to do with that? But earlier on in the movie, you had seen him, he lit a cigarette, but he had even rolled that cigarette and lit it. Yes. So if he can do that with no arms, no feet, no nothing.
He can stab.
Dude.
And cut something off. And Cleopatra, she's running, and basically what this is saying is she has become a grotesque, squawking human duck is what they turned her into. And the flesh of her hands has been melted to look like webbed feet and hands, and her legs have been cut off. And what is left of her torso has been permanently tarred and feathered. So she is the opening scene's cause for alarm. So this all came full circle. In the beginning, the people were screaming about a freak, and you find out it was somebody who tried to kill and hated the freaks. And so they made her one of them.
Absolutely. But it doesn't end there.
So the original ending basically stopped here. But the studio was like, this is like when we were talking about some of the older movies, how they had disclaimers about this is going to be this like Frankenstein, like just beware, beware, beware. So they wanted to put in a happier ending. They didn't want to leave it off with they just turned her into a freak, because that would leave a bad taste in people's mouth when they left the theater. So in the end of it, Hans is living his best life. He is living it up. He's rich as hell.
But he's so unhappy.
Yes.
He's lonely. He turns everyone away. He won't talk to anyone.
And Frida was his fiance and ain't. So Venus and Froso, did I say that right? Froso visit, and they bring Frida, and that was who Hans was engaged to. And Hans basically refuses to see them, but they force their way past. He has like these servants. And Frida assures Hans that she knows he tried to stop the others from exacting revenge. And Venus and her boyfriend leave. and Frida tries to comfort Hans as he's crying, which is not like the happiest ending.
I was going to say, I feel like that's almost sadder. I'd be like, she deserves that shit.
I agree. And, you know, yes, he's living it up in a mansion, but he's also just really empty and haunted by this experience. So yeah. So it's a really short movie. That's why this is so short. There's a lot of dialogue in between of things happening here and there. But the main point of this that I think the creator was trying to get to was you're not any better for just being normal, you know?
Right.
And they come around to get their revenge and it all comes full circle. And she now realizes what it's like to be one of them and deserves it for treating them so horribly.
So Hans and Frida were actually brother and sister in real life.
Really?
That's why the relationship was actually kept at such a minimum. They didn't kiss, they didn't hold hands or anything like that because they were brother and sister.
That would be hard to act, I think.
Uh-huh.
Because he still says, like, I only have eyes for you, my dear, and things like that.
This movie is actually still illegal in some parts of the U.S. It's not enforced anymore, but it's actually illegal to even watch this movie.
It was one of those laws that just never
got taken off the books.
Yeah. Well, and we talked about at the beginning that we were going to come back to this of it being banned and there being outcry, and it was because these were all quote-unquote normal people like Cleopatra being attacked by these deformed monstrosities that many people didn't see as people. So seeing one of their own taken down by these freaks, I'm assuming, is what got this on the chopping block, you know?
Exactly. Most of the quote-unquote freaks of the movie, so the real circus people that were in this, actually at one point or another expressed their disdain for this movie. They actually hated being in it, except for one. Except for Johnny Eck. He was the man who didn't have a bottom. Just, he walked on his hands. Yeah. He actually loved it. He touted this everywhere he went. He was like, I was in that movie. He was so proud of it.
I mean, especially, okay, this is going to seem kind of like a hipster of me, but especially in being something that the mainstream absolutely hated and thought was grotesque, I'd be like, hell yeah, I was in that. I love that shit.
Exactly, right?
You're not allowed to watch it. That's how good it was.
Yes. So Tod Browning, I talked earlier how he was actually in the circus. That's why he felt so much for these people.
Yeah.
He was a clown and a contortionist in the circus.
Ooh, your favorite contortionist.
I know. That's all I thought of. I was like, oh, God, okay. And once again, I also talked about how he really had these freaks go Hollywood, and they would wear sunglasses on set, and they actually ended up in fights on set even because they were like, no, I'm the most important one. No, I'm the most important one of this whole movie. They were very demanding. They demanded stuff all over the set of people bring them this and all of that. And Tod Browning, he was like, do it.
Yeah. I enjoyed this movie. It's one of those where I didn't realize how much I really enjoyed old movies, especially old horror, until I started watching them. Horror. Frankenstein, The Blob, Creature from the Black Lagoon,
I'm so
Freaks,
happy to hear that.
Nosferatu, Dracula, those things that I've watched.
No one to watch that stuff with.
Yeah,
so I'm so happy.
Even if some of them we haven't done yet, you and I started before the podcast was even a thought. Yeah. We started that list because we really are the only friends that we have in person.
Yeah,
like I have a lot of friends that like horror, but not that are just like right with me. Mm-hmm. That really love that. And so we were like, well, let's do this list, 100 of the best scary movies according to Rotten Tomatoes, which basically goes back to when horror film cinema started.
Yes.
So we watched The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari.
We watched so many silent films that were so good.
Yes.
That was a great one.
Yeah, it was. And so it's cool to see horror and have such a mix of what we're doing, because it's not like we're just doing like, you know, let's just do the 60s through now, which is when horror really was on the come up. But there were so many good, creepy, scary things, which is cool because if you think about how back folklore and scary stories go back, I mean, it's ingrained in our history from probably the beginning, whether it was to scare children into behaving or to explain something that was unexplainable, or just we're humans and we like adrenaline.
Absolutely.
You know? Mm-hmm. So it's cool to see these older movies and the takes that they have on things and the way that culture has shifted and things have become politically incorrect that weren't, like even just the terms they were using in this movie. Like you don't just walk around saying the midget over there.
Right.
that's
you
offensive.
Literally could not remake this movie.
No.
Like, there's so many things we can and do remake. This is not something that will ever be on the list.
Even Freak Show was still riding the line, you know.
And that only worked out because we didn't use real quote-unquote freaks.
Yeah.
We used people that we put in costumes and made it look as close as possible.
Exactly. So it's really cool to see the evolution of horror and how these creators, directors, producers, actors did these things for the audience that they had. Mm-hmm. So I really appreciate it a lot.
Yeah. And we're lucky that Tod Browning had just done Dracula and he was given the all okay to do whatever he wanted. Yeah. Otherwise, we still wouldn't have this.
Right, exactly.
I mean, I keep doing this lately, but I love all these movies, and this is definitely a classic that we definitely need to have in the world, I think. And I'm glad we do. And I give it a 5. Absolutely.
I'd give it a 4. You're just going to smack me one day.
No.
Be like, give something a 5.
No, I give a lot of 5s because I'm such a movie person that I just love so many movies that it's hard to say on some.
It's hard to find like those faults.
So yours are probably truer opinions on movies than mine.
Well, it's just, there was a lot of time because we really cut a lot out of the scene by scene walkthrough. There were Siamese twins and one was getting married, and it kind of goes into how you can kind of see that they share the same physical responses to things. There were a lot of conversations on the side, but just like the meat of this movie, if you will, is just about this plot and revenge and this moral, and so there was a lot cut out, but and not that dialogue is bad, it was just really difficult to hear, and sometimes the older movies are a little more difficult to put together to make a cohesive stretch, if you will. The storytelling is a little bit more abrupt, but maybe that's just because they didn't need to fluff it like they need to fluff things now to keep people's attention. I don't know. But it was still a very good movie, and it's definitely one that I will watch again. If we ever stop doing this podcast, for example, this is one that I would still watch.
Still continue.
This regardless.
Yeah.
Exactly. So yeah, I'd say 4 out of 5. So we have a Haunted Happy Hour coming up that we are really excited about because you actually have a story for this one coming up.
I do have a story for this one.
I do not, but I can research them. And also, since I don't have a story, you guys can help me have some stories to tell if you would send them in. If you have ever had any near-death experiences, I'm not going to tell yours, but you have had something
I have.
that you experienced when that happened. So if you've been in like a coma or almost died, seeing your life flash before your eyes, anything in that realm, or you even feel like you were almost about to die, like anything, any of your perception and interpretation of that, however it may be, email it to us. Our email is theexorcisters@gmail.com. Again, the Exorcisters is the Exorcist with an ERS. It's super easy. Send that in. You can find us on Facebook. You can also DM us on Facebook, Instagram, Twitter. Facebook and Instagram are The Exorcisters Podcast. Twitter is just @The You can also find all of our podcast episodes, reviews, ratings, blog posts on our website at www.exorcisters.com.
And next time, you'll wish it was only make-believe. Till then, stay creepy.